Hey everybody, welcome to the Unstoppable Podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and I'm here today with our guest, Hashoshi. He is a crypto YouTuber and influencer. He has weekly educational content on his YouTube channel about blockchain, crypto, and just technology in general, and I'm super excited to have him here with me today to talk to him about how he got into this space, how he started creating these videos and all of this awesome educational content, and he's also our influencer of the month for July 2021, and so super excited to be working with him on a variety of different content aside from this podcast episode. If you're listening to this, definitely go check out our videos on our channel and then on Hashoshi's channel as well, so you can get to know him a little bit better and learn more about what he's working on. So welcome, Hashoshi. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, Diana, thanks for having me. Really excited about this one.
Awesome. So you are obviously a very well-known crypto influencer, YouTuber, but I want to know about who was Hashoshi before he was Hashoshi. Who were you before all of this stuff? And like, what's your background and how did you get into crypto in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Hashoshi before this was actually someone who would have never, ever made videos and published them online. It took me years to really push myself to do that. Kind of an introverted guy by nature. But before all of this, before YouTube and everything, I was kind of I was a student who really had no clue what I wanted to do. I was interested in a lot of different topics, really interested in technology. My dad's in technology. He was a programmer, so I fell in love with that at a young age. But I was also interested in economics and finance and, history and all sorts of stuff. And I literally stumbled upon the Bitcoin white paper, now about 11 years ago. So this is 2009, 2010, maybe even earlier than that. I don't remember the exact year. And I was in class on StumbleUpon, clicking through, trying to find something to read. And I read this paper. And it was so multidisciplinary in that it covered so many different topics in game theory, economics, monetary systems, technology, all this stuff together. And it was like, this is what I want to do for a living, because this gives me the chance to do so many different things and not focus on one single topic. And so after that, I kind of went through the rabbit hole. I was, buying and selling trading cards with Bitcoin on Reddit and stuff, kind of like how normally people were getting into crypto. And I stuck with it. Ethereum came out and I just kept reading and learning and trying to pick up new things and kind of parlayed that into development, started tinkering with Solidity when smart contracts came, became more prevalent in Ethereum. And fast forward, I basically was, working with clients and building dApps and also some other full stack applications like JavaScript web apps and stuff. And they would always ask me the same sort of questions about blockchain and crypto. And so I started recording videos to explain basic topics like what is hashing or what is blockchain, so that I didn't have to keep explaining it in the simplest terms and I could kind of send it ahead of time. And other people started watching them and commenting on them. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not super comfortable with this whole video thing, but I'm just going to keep doing it and see what happens. And then, here we are 4 years later, I'm still doing it. And it's turned into something that's really fun that I like doing.
That's awesome. So when you first read the Bitcoin white paper back in 2009, 2010, super early days, did you just buy into it right off the bat? Or was there some hesitation? Did you have doubts? Were you like, what is this? I don't understand it. I feel like most people even today will get exposed to crypto or blockchain concepts and still have a lot of confusion and doubt around it. And so this is, 11 years ago. I think it was even more, it's even more, I guess, just incredible to think that somebody could have just picked that up and, understood it or bought into it or saw the potential of it right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say that I was okay, all in. First of all, I didn't really have money back then. So it was I didn't really have the opportunity to buy a bunch, and there was also not really that many places to actually go buy it. There wasn't a Coinbase type of experience. People hate on Coinbase, but they did make it really easy to get into Bitcoin and others. So I mean, and back then I was hesitant that other people that weren't kind of nerds like me would ever care about it. I really didn't think so. And I actually remember several conversations with friends and family yeah, the Bitcoin thing is cool, but I'm not sure that people are going to adopt it, that anyone's going to care, and that anyone besides me and a couple other people are really going to use it. And I was totally wrong on that, right? And so I don't think that there are very few people, like you said, that read it, that got into Bitcoin in some form or fashion, that understood where it was going to go and how far it was going to go. Like, if you told me back then that Bitcoin would reach $65,000 US, I would have laughed at you, right? And like, this is from a person who like understood it and believes it and believed in it to an extent. Obviously my life would be very different if I had thought about it that way, but that's just the truth. I wasn't aware of how big and well adopted it would be.
Yeah. So for somebody listening maybe to this podcast or just getting into the space today, how would you explain crypto and blockchain to a total newbie that's just getting into it today?
I think that's like one of the most interesting questions, and it's like it's almost subjective in the sense that how people, like what people value in it, could be different. But to me, it's really at very face value. It's taking traditional systems that we have. So, like for example, like banking and monetary systems where you exchange value with somebody else. All of those are operated in a way that there are centralized entities who control the supply of the monetary instrument, who control the rules around how you transact that money. They sort of have final approval as to who can participate and who you can transact with. And in this case, you can achieve all the core benefits of having a centralized authority, like preventing double spend, preventing one person from just creating new money supply or like blocking transactions. You can do all that in a decentralized ecosystem by way of a consensus mechanism where you have a shared ledger. Everyone keeps a copy of that ledger and helps to sort of validate transactions and hold each other accountable. And in that way, you can get rid of those middlemen that introduce cost or gatekeep those systems, and then achieve the same goals without a single like sort of bordered walled garden. And the same thing applies for computation as well, for applications. So like with Facebook, for example, you go on Facebook, you're reaching out to a server where they have application code that is opaque to you. You don't really see it. You don't really control it. There's no clarity on what the rules are necessarily. And then you go to something like Ethereum. All decentralized applications are essentially open source. You can go and look at the code, you can verify what they do and how they do it, and you can audit it very clearly. And the only middleman in that situation really is the code itself. So the platform is very much so the middleman rather than like a server and a big company, et cetera. So it's like just a big paradigm shift away from very centrally dominated services across the board.
I really like the way that you explain that, because a lot of people, I think, still have this impression of crypto as being just for finance people. If you're not into finance, if you're not into stocks, then there's no draw in crypto for you. And the way you explain that is really as more of an idea or a movement or a concept than, a specific application to one field like finance, for instance. So I love that explanation.
Thanks. Yeah. And it gets misconstrued as this like sort of like pseudo anarchistic thing, and it really isn't. It's just moving technology and common like interactions between human beings to what it really, in my opinion, should have been from the very beginning. Like the internet was designed to make information decentralized and readily available, and the internet, just by way of like human nature, like sort of centralizing forces, has kind of become a very gate-kept environment. I think blockchain in general as a technology is sort of moving us towards where the internet was trying to go in the first place and just wasn't yet able to do because the technology wasn't there. And it's an exciting time, but we're still so early. So it's not a get rich quick scheme. It's not like in 2022, everything's going to be like done and ready to go and the world's going to change. It's going to take time, but it's an exciting paradigm shift.
Yeah, for sure. And one way I've heard it said is it's an evolution, not a revolution. So going back to your point about we're not just like a bunch of anarchists trying to like completely like derail the system that we've lived in. It's just an evolution into, hopefully a better world. Totally. Cool. So I'm also wondering too, like you are the go-to source for learning for so many people in the space. So for you, like who's your go-to source for learning? Yeah,
there's a lot out there. I mean, I've been and it's a tough thing to do, but I'm a big reader of white papers. I know a lot of people don't like white papers, but I actually don't mind the like ugly math and like really technical stuff. So I read a lot of white papers, particularly white papers written by folks with like really lofty ideas, like Gavin Wood, for example, behind Polkadot, and also early Ethereum material as well. But other creators as well. I think that Guy from Coin Bureau is fantastic, right? I also think that the content that Andreas Antonopoulos has made in general is just high quality, like very easy to understand technical stuff. So it's like understanding multisigs or understanding how the underlying components of Bitcoin work. And then some of those books that he's written as well, like with Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum. Those are both like, those are the, if you want two books that will change how you look at crypto and how you understand the technology behind it, just buy those two books. Like, even if you have to sell some crypto to buy it, do it, because those books like will give you a ton of background knowledge. Like those are my bread and butter, to be honest.
Okay, so that is what I will be doing right after this podcast then.
Yeah.
So let's get into your YouTube channel, Hashoshi, and this whole brand that you've built. So, you know, you mentioned earlier that it sort of just like happened. It wasn't an intentional decision. It was like you started making videos to explain things to people, and then it turned into this whole thing. Where did the name Hashoshi come from?
That's funny. So the very first video that I like wrote that I wanted to make was like, what is hashing? Because everyone's like, well, what the hell is hashing? You know, why is it important? How does it work? You know, it's a foundational, I guess, component of actually all blockchain networks, to be honest. So I basically took hash, the root word of the verb, and then mixed it with Satoshi for Satoshi Nakamoto and just ran with that. It was like it took, like, most people like spend a lot of time thinking about like branding, like what their name is. That was a decision that took me 8 seconds. I'm like, okay, what's a cool name? Okay, that works for me. Typed it in, uploaded the video, and then I was done. So it like really, there wasn't a whole lot of thought to it, but that's where it came from.
Gotcha. And so was it always, you know, did you always know that you would go with a pseudonym instead of going with your real name? Or like, what was the thinking behind that? Because, you know, in the crypto space, it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing to go with a pseudonym or to be completely anonymous instead of using your real name. And this was 4 years ago, I think, that you started this, 4 or 5 years ago. And so you were kind of early to the pseudonym game.
Yeah, and I think it's just a personality thing. Like, I was already not super like comfortable putting stuff out there, and so it's like an extra little layer of like, even though my face is on video, like anyone who really wants to figure out who I am realistically could probably do so. It would take some digging, but they could probably do so. It was more about like me just creating a name that I thought was interesting, and then creating content with it. It was like kind of like, it made it lower pressure for me. And then subsequently too, I'm kind of like a private guy in general. Like, people who follow me on social media, I'm always talking about, you know, privacy and things that you can do in your everyday life to just keep your personal info from just being circulated widely on the web. And yeah, so I guess it's just like a personality thing. No other reason other than that. And to be honest with you, I've thought about kind of just putting my real name out there again, but we'll see. Maybe one day.
Yeah, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So I want to know a little bit more about your content process. So walk me through the process of like what goes into creating one of your videos. Like, how long does it take? Like, how you know, how long do you spend planning it out versus recording? Do you have to do a lot of takes? Talk me through your process.
Yeah, my process has changed a ton since I started. When I started, it was like I would write notes down, and I would plan it out, and it would take me a long time because I wasn't fully comfortable talking to a camera. I would make a lot of mistakes, and then I wasn't fully comfortable with editing software either. So it's like the whole thing kind of took me a long time. I had familiarity with cameras because I'd been doing like camera stuff for a long time, but now I've gotten kind of more comfortable, and I'm better now at speaking to inanimate objects, I guess, which is like this weird psychosis that you have to have as a YouTube person. And so my goal is always to do all my videos in one take. It doesn't always work out that way, but I would say 70% of my videos I can get through in one take, where I'm just kind of breaking, where I'll edit for like transitions between segments. And that's made my life so much easier, even in edit. And then it's just overlaying, imagery and other things like that, any music that I want to add potentially. So, I mean, now videos that used to take me 6 hours could take me like 2 hours, which is fantastic, because I still have all sorts of other work. Like this is probably the smallest thing that I do in my life. So like this, it can't take 6 hours or I would go crazy. So it's great that it's been optimized, and I want to start being able to post more content and more videos for folks. So the more I can optimize and get stuff done, the better. But for me, it's all about quality. If I think that whatever I write isn't going to be valuable, then I'll scrap it and redo it. And if it comes out a month later, then that's totally fine. But when I post, I want it to be good.
And how do you get ideas for your content? Is it really just whatever you're thinking of at the moment, or do you sort of go like the SEO route, where you see what keywords are really doing well with SEO, and then go after those videos, or what's your process for coming up with ideas?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. I will sometimes, I often do content from questions, like people that ask me a ton of questions online and stuff on Twitter or Discord or YouTube or whatever, and I will kind of find themes in the questions, and if it's one that warrants a full video, I'll do that. The other one is I make content about stuff I like and stuff that I have like interesting insights to talk about, and it's almost to my detriment, because like my channel probably, like you can grow a channel very quickly by saying and doing and making content about certain things that are really hot. It's just not really interesting to me, and it's not fun. It's like I just don't do it. And at that point, it's kind of, for me, when I sit there and I think about something, it often will start off as like one line where I think about something like, this theme would be really cool in a video. Like I did a video about Chainlink VRF, like verifiable random functions. And I'm like, people really care about this, and it's sort of relevant to DeFi and relevant to NFTs, and it's like a cool like thematic storyline. And so I made that video, and that's generally how they start. It's just an idea pops in my head, I write it down, and then I kind of pick from it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Another thing I think about a lot is how Web3 is going to sort of change the script for content creators, and I'm sure it's something you've thought about too. Right now, you're even though you're talking about Web3 concepts in your videos, you're still very much a Web 2 content creator. You still exist in this Web 2 space. And so when you think about how Web 3 is going to change the landscape for content creators, what sorts of things do you think about, and like how will, like in, I don't know how long, 10 years, 20 years, when we're really fully moved on to Web 3 and, you're still a YouTuber maybe, or a different type of content creator, how will your life look differently then?
I think that the thing that's holding back Web3 content right now is the fact that it's very human, in the sense that like a lot of the complaints people have about Web2, like traditional content platforms like YouTube or even other social media platforms like Twitter, is like everyone's like, oh, censorship is bad, and removing people from the platform is bad. When in reality, it's like when you click the checkbox for terms and conditions, like you should be aware that that is what you are doing. Like you are signing away your rights to be complaining about these sorts of things in a private like environment. And all of these platforms are centralized entities that need to make money, and they can't make money if certain content is there. They can't advertise certain things. So it's like, they probably, in my opinion, these platforms don't really want to censor people, but the nature of their business is that they have to, and that is the reason why they do so. Even though some might think it's like a deep state conspiracy, which, think what you would like, that's totally fine. Web3 though is kind of on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, where it's like anything goes, and I think that actually makes it harder for those platforms to succeed, because no matter who you are, you have deep-rooted beliefs and thoughts. And you might go on one of those platforms as sort of an average non-crypto, non-Web3 type user to just see what's going on there. And like, be like, I'm never coming back here because there's all sorts of crazy stuff being posted there. And the truth about content is that eyeballs are king. And the reason that YouTube is so successful is because they have almost a captive audience of like billions of eyeballs that are looking for content and will ravenously consume content. And their like content delivery is top notch in terms of matching people to content they want to watch. Web3 platforms need to nail that down before they start nailing down all of the like the freedom parts and the crypto oriented like incentive programs. Those things are not going to matter if you can't get people on the platform to actually use it. And so not going to say I have all the answers because I haven't, I'm only one guy and I'm not that special, to be honest with you. So I just believe that at some point there's going to have to be some sort of mechanism by which governance can be achieved on these platforms to sort of shave off both spectrums of crazy so that there's freedom, but not so much freedom that people don't even want to be there. And the comments are like so horrendously scary and terrible that people are like, don't want to even go to the website, that those types of things are important. And it's a tough balance to strike. It's like content that can't be taken down, that's 100% owned by the creator, is very good, but there are also bad things that come with it. And it's how do you balance those two things? That's really challenging. So it'll take a while for those problems to be solved. But I'm very excited for that to happen because I will use those platforms when that day does come.
For sure. Those are some really good points. Do you think that in those decentralized platforms that it'll almost be self-filtering? Like, if one of the platforms does get crazy out of control with a bunch of uncensored content that nobody even wants to look at, then that'll just be like that'll naturally filter out everybody from the platform, and that platform will die out, and then everybody will go to another platform. Do you sort of see it happening like that, where platforms consist of creators and viewers that share similar interests or share similar views on things, and they'll naturally gravitate towards the same platform and naturally gravitate towards each other? Do you think it'll be self-filtering in that way, or do you think it'll really just like get out of hand and we have to have some level of centralization to keep people under control?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, and you could also argue like what is good, quote unquote good, I know it's subjective, for humanity. In my opinion, it's creating a platform in which a wide variety of opinions can coexist in a nice way. The unfortunate part is human beings don't really like to play nicely with people that don't believe what they believe. So is it likely that ever happens? Probably not. So where I think we'll end up going is a hybrid model where the actual content and the model of compensation for creators will be more open and decentralized and borderless, where like if I'm in a small country that doesn't have a huge global trade footprint, I can make just as much money if my content is good as somebody else, even though the partner program is not well developed there, right? Like that's the goal. Enablement of all creators around the world to be able to do this equitably. Like I'm in the US, I have tons more opportunities than somebody else that's creating maybe the same exact quality content that I'm making or better that can't make a cent doing it. And I don't run ads because it's not my thing. But if I did, I would make way more money than somebody else in another country. Like that needs to be fixed. In terms of like moderating content and censorship, I think to solve the problem, you really just have to move away from having one big monster monolithic entity making all the decisions unilaterally. If you were to put a governance council in place of a nice mix of, could be even staking elected officials, if you will, to help make those kind of governance decisions about content, that could be a solution, because then it's not one single opinion governing what's okay and what's not. Is that the final answer? Probably not, but I think it could work. And ultimately, I think that the biggest goal is looking for a solution where there is reason and that you're providing protection from like the totally out there crazy stuff, but you're also giving people the platform to share their opinion and research based or fact based evaluations of certain events or things that are going on without having to feel like they're being removed their platform.
Yeah, for sure. All very good points as well. And then another consideration that, content creators talk about all the time is just making money. And that's a big complaint that people have on these platforms like YouTube or artists with Spotify, is that the platform takes such a big cut of the money that you could be making from the views you're actually generating. And you made a good point. It's like, well, you have to have the eyeballs on your content first, and that's what they're helping you do. So definitely there are two sides to that coin. But when you think about the Web3 world, do you think that creators will be able to make more money on Web3 platforms because that middleman is eliminated and they can get paid directly by their fans? Or do you think that because of this, elimination of the middleman, that anybody can be creating content and that there will actually be more competition in the space for creators and it'll actually be harder for them to make money because they're competing with more people? How do you view that sort of, the two sides of that coin?
Yeah, there's a niche for everyone, I think. Like your one's niche might be smaller than another one. Like on YouTube right now, if you talk about like financial products, like and investing or like wealth, you'll make a ton more money than somebody who talks about like basket weaving, right? Like there's probably a ton of people who care about basket weaving, but like it's just not as much of like an advertisable or an advertiser friendly topic. So, that side of the business means that depending on what niche you have, you make less money because it's all driven by like where advertisers want to put their stuff. When it's direct payment from like content creators, so like if you look at something like Brave Browser, for example, where the longer the eyeballs are looking at your stuff and watching your content, the more money is being contributed in the form of basic attention tokens. Like that is a very equitable way of doing it because the more people that care about your stuff, regardless of what topic you're talking about, you're getting paid relatively the same amount. That being said, like there will be inevitably more competition because this will be an open, sort of an open system. But I actually think that's to creators' benefit because there's now a lot of fragmentation in terms of how people consume content around the world. And in even like video, like in parts of Asia, like YouTube is either not allowed or people just don't use it because it's not like the thing there. And there's another platform. If there were a place where globally people could consume content all in the same place, it's like there will be more content to consume, but way more people to consume it as well. So I think the ratio will still even out over time. And the truth of the matter is, one thing that I've sort of figured out in this whole like YouTube journey thing is persistence and continuously creating stuff is like the only thing you really have to do. Like you have to make good content that people care about, but if you just keep making content, you are already top 1% because most people make 10 videos, make 50 videos and then quit because they're not getting famous. And then they're like that. Those people are not necessarily competition. It may look like they are because their channel still exists, but they're not actively creating. So like the real competitive landscape is actually not as big as people might think, in my opinion.
Very good points there. Yeah, very true. I would agree with that. Cool. So, all right, let's do something fun here since you're sort of the master of explaining, complex crypto concepts to newbies. And so I've got a list of words here and they're crypto words. They're kind of just like buzzwords in that you see in the space that newbies, I'm sure, have all had some exposure to and probably don't know what they mean. And I'm just going to go down the list and give you a chance to explain it to a newbie. Okay. So explain it in a very basic way that, is easy to understand and gets them excited to learn more. So the first one I've got here is Bitcoin.
What is Bitcoin? In my opinion, and this is an opinion, Bitcoin in its most simplest form is a store of value platform on which you can exchange value with individuals or groups in a peer-to-peer fashion. And it is a great representation of what gold is, which is a finite supply asset that is not necessarily controlled by a single person or a single entity. The supply is non-malleable. You can't just arbitrarily create more. And therefore, because of the way that it is issued over time, as the network and transactions are mined into blocks, that means that over time, the pressure of new supply entering into circulation, actively available to other people, you start to have this upward pressure in price. As long as demand stays static for Bitcoin, because of the fixed supply and the ever reducing rate of inflation or release of supply, the generally higher the price will go. And over time, if you look at the macro trend, that's kind of what has happened. And so the narrative is Bitcoin is very much the new digital store of value that is in its own right borderless and accessible to virtually everyone. That is, I think, the biggest thing to take away without really even having to understand a whole lot about how it works. Like, that is what Bitcoin is. It's like sound money, if you will, or a sound asset.
Awesome. Okay, so this next word I have is Ethereum. And so it might be more helpful to talk about it in the context of what you just said about what is Bitcoin and compare and contrast. So I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so Ethereum in juxtaposition to Bitcoin is less about the asset itself, which in Ethereum is Ether. It's more about Ether being a unit or a utility, or truly like it's more like money. Ether is more like money that you might be used to, where you spend your money to achieve certain goals or tasks or to do something. In the Ethereum world, the focus is about decentralized applications, or dApps. And so in contrast to Bitcoin, Ethereum is an execution environment where developers can write code which executes in the context of the blockchain. And without getting into too much technical jargon, essentially everyone in the network, all the members of the network, independently validate the output of that code's execution. So it's not like it's just code that executes in this black box. It's basically open source code that's executed, and everyone validates that the output is in fact legitimate based on the inputs. That's basically determinism. The same inputs will always equal the same outputs. And in that case, right, Ether is basically just a mechanism by which to pay for executions and to exchange sort of a base layer of value between entities on the network. So if you think about it, it really is a lot like money, in the sense that when you want to execute a piece of code, you pay a small denomination of Ether to do so. If you want to send Ether to somebody else to pay for a good or service, you can send Ether directly to them. So there's this, it's almost like a whole world computer, as it was described in the white paper, the yellow paper, early on. That's how you can think about it. And to me, everyone thinks about Bitcoin and Ethereum as competition. In fact, they are actually two of the most complementary pieces of technology ever, because Bitcoin can be a place almost like a savings account for people to store and accrue value over time. Obviously, in the micro, everyone's like, oh, well, Bitcoin's halved from its all-time high. Yes, but over time, it does generally increase in value. And Ethereum is where you can then take that value that is stored on the Bitcoin network and put it to use, like put it to some sort of application, and then move that. What if you've made money in the Ethereum world on an application, you can move it back into the Bitcoin world to sort of save and grow over time. So they're very complementary in the way that they're built, despite what you might see on Twitter and people arguing.
I love that explanation and that framing of it. I absolutely agree with you. They are complementary. They are not in competition with one another. All right. The next word I have is blockchain technology.
Yeah. Blockchain is what underpins Bitcoin, Ethereum, basically all of the blockchains that you hear about, like the protocols that you hear about. And at its very base layer, blockchain technology is derivative of a distributed ledger, which basically is a ledger that contains the state of transactions, which are basically events that, like, I sent 1 Bitcoin to Diana yesterday. It's like those are the types of things that are stored in it. Or in the Ethereum world, executing this smart contract with this output at this timestamp for this amount of Ether. That's what's recorded in the ledger. Now, in a traditional system, you would have a centralized server that would do this computation, store that into a database as like a record, And there would be an administrator who can basically add, remove records at will, manipulate the data, change the rules without telling you, what have you. In a blockchain, instead, the way that execution is done is by way of distributing that ledger to a bunch of different participants, which are called nodes in this case, which are just computers running the same software. These nodes agree to a protocol, which is how transactions get written to that ledger, how you agree on a certain cadence about what's in that ledger, and then moving forward, that basically carries as the protocol. So, for example, you would have transactions rolling in to a queue, essentially. Those transactions get pulled into blocks, and then each block is tied to the previous one. It creates a chain of blocks, hence the name blockchain. And the validation part of it is really derivative of everyone in the network having a copy of that same ledger to keep each other accountable instead of having a central authority to do so. And then on a certain cadence, every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes, sometimes every 30 seconds, depending on the protocol, agreeing on the state of that ledger. So saying, hey, we agree that all the transactions up to now are valid. Now moving forward, we'll keep doing this every X number of minutes or X number of seconds. And that's all without a central authority. So without getting into the consensus mechanism part, which is a rabbit hole, just know that when the network reaches consensus, it is in the absence of a centralized party to do that work. That's really what a blockchain is. And all the protocol stuff built on top of it is what makes each blockchain itself unique.
Perfect. I can now tell why you're a crypto YouTuber, because you're so good at explaining these things. All right, next word I have for you is DeFi.
Yeah, DeFi is a very deep one, but at the highest possible level, DeFi stands for decentralized finance, and decentralized finance really represents a shift from centralized authority-driven financial products, so things like lending, right? You can go to a bank and you can get a personal loan to remodel your bathroom. Unfortunately, to do that, you are basically borrowing money from, deposited funds in that bank. They're charging you an interest rate that is extremely high, like, depending on your credit, right? You could be paying 10, 15, 20%, maybe even more, depending on the type of loan that you're getting. And the person's money that you are effectively borrowing is money that's in deposit, so other people's, accounts with that bank. The interest that bank is paying the person whose money they're lending is negligible. We're talking like on a good day, you can get in the 1 or 2%. Right now are not good days, so you're getting paid virtually nothing, or you're actually losing money due to inflation. That's another story. But in the decentralized finance world, you basically are taking what the bank does and you are replacing the bank, that middleman, with a smart contract. So instead of an entity being a middleman, you have code as the middleman. And the focus of that code is to do that same sort of work. And so you have DeFi lending platforms like Aave, for example, is a great one. And essentially, it just basically matches people that want to lend cryptocurrency to people that want to borrow cryptocurrency, and uses algorithms or other calculations to determine what interest rates these certain lending deals pay. Effectively, it means that it's more equitable, meaning those who are lending cryptocurrency are going to get paid much better rates, and people who are borrowing subsequently are going to get better rates on the borrow, because the actual platform itself, which was the bank, doesn't get to charge a ridiculous amount and commit it to profit, right? So it's basically a shift away from the old way of doing certain, facilitating certain financial products, to a new way of doing so, where generally you have to trust in the code rather than trusting in a central authority, generally speaking.
Perfect. All right, I've got 2 more for you. The next one is NFT.
Yeah, NFTs. This is a good one. One of my favorite topics, actually. So like when talking about NFTs, it stands for non-fungible tokens. And the first thing people say, like, what the hell is fungible mean? And in general, fungibility is really like whether or not an asset can be exchanged on a one-to-one basis with another of like kind. So a fungible asset would be something like a dollar bill. I don't care what dollar bill I have and what serial number it has on it, as long as, because it's worth $1. Every dollar bill is worth $1. So it is, in that case, fungible. A non-fungible asset is something that has unique attributes that make it more or less valuable than another of like kind. So that would be something like a baseball card or a Pokemon card or some other collectible like art, for example. You may have two Pokemon cards in your hand, but both of them will be worth very, very different values based on their unique attributes, their rarity, whether they're holographic or not, what they do in the actual game of Pokemon. That's what a non-fungible asset is. And so non-fungible tokens are just digital mechanisms by which you can create non-fungible assets. And so in the context of a blockchain, a non-fungible token is really a unique, one-of-a-kind number, really, if you think about it. It's like a unique identifier that points to a piece of media. That might be a video, it might be a piece of digital art, it might be an in-game item, what have you, but each individual token is unique in its own sense, which is different than something like a stable coin, like a USD coin or USDC, which is a fungible ERC20 token, which can then be used like money, right? Because I don't care what USDC I have, because it's still worth about $1, you know? So that's really what a non-fungible token is, and I know there's a lot of depth to that topic. I think we've got some pretty interesting content coming out about that, so stay tuned.
Yes, for sure. If you want to hear more about NFTs and hear Hashoshi talk more about it, go to his channel, go to our channel, Unstoppable Domains, and you'll see more content there. All right, and then last word I have for you is seemingly the hot topic nowadays, as the NFT craze has slowed down a little bit from the first half of the year. Now we're moving into DAOs. Everybody's talking about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, DAOs are like sort of the next, in my opinion, one of the next big things. It was actually very popular early on in sort of the crypto space or the Web3 space. But essentially, a decentralized autonomous organization is a governance mechanism by which decisions can be made on behalf of a larger group by this sort of predefined decentralized council, I guess you could call it, or a group. And often these DAOs are built upon an agreed set of rules, which are, you know, how you may elect decision makers, whether is it by like, you know, direct voting where you tally up votes, and then there's a cycle where you maybe are in charge of governance for 5 days, how voting occurs on decision making. But DAOs are now being built into protocols, actual blockchain protocols, to eliminate one more of those centralizing forces, which is like the core foundation behind the project, leading all the development on new features for the project. So you see Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation, that's often a sort of cut against Ethereum, is that the Ethereum Foundation, folks like Vitalik Buterin, one of the person who's credited with most of the work behind Ethereum, the figurehead of Ethereum, if you will, being in charge of Ethereum. And so the answer to that is generally DAOs, and that is creating a mechanism by which general participants that just interact with the blockchain network or interact with a specific project can then become or be involved in the decision-making process of funding new development, making decisions about different network parameters that might need to be changed, the issuance of new coins on the network, those sorts of things. It's basically digital democracy in the context of a blockchain network as a whole, or a project, an individual like DeFi project or NFT project, what have you. So it's a mechanism or a means to an end for decentralization, if you will.
Amazing. All right. Awesome job with that. I hope that was fun for you. It was very educational for me. One question I have for you is for newbies listening to this and they're like, man, I want to learn more. Other than going to your YouTube channel and looking at your stuff, what are some of the best ways for newbies to start learning about the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing to do is to try and extricate the two sides of crypto from each other, which is the money part, which is the buy this token, get rich, because that to me is the nonsense part, because it isn't deterministic like that. It's like if you put money here, you will become rich. That part doesn't matter. It's really what will drive good investment decisions, if that's something that you're into in the first place, which is, again, a personal choice. The focus should be finding out about projects that make sense to you and looking at them from a problem-focused perspective. Does this protocol solve a problem that exists in the real world or in the crypto, like Web3 world that we've found? And do you think realistically people will use this? Is it going to make people's lives better? And then also not just the technology, because that's sometimes hard for people to grasp if you're not a tech person. It should also be, if you're not a tech person, how comfortable do you feel when you're reading all the stuff and you're trying to use the protocol? If there's no wallet available for you to use, if the wallet requires like command line terminal like code and all sorts of crazy stuff to even get started, that might indicate to you, okay, well, this isn't ready for mainstream adoption, and it's hard for normal everyday people and non-technical people to use. Maybe it's not mature enough for me to want to invest in yet. So like being very focused on what you know and what you can understand and how you value something is key. And you can find that on project websites. You can find that on YouTube, not just my channel. There are plenty of other ones. And then also like some of these exchanges have started coming out with really good informational content, like Kraken and Gemini both have like this whole page devoted to explaining projects in relatively simple terms. I mean, obviously it benefits them because most of the assets they talk about are ones that are listed on their exchange. So take it with a grain of salt, but those are great places to start to like really pick it up and learn and see what you like, what you don't like. And my recommendation is always just be conservative and don't fall into the trap of like the cycle of content, because content is content for a reason. People make stuff that they think is going to get clicked. And what's going to get clicked, if you look at 2 videos, is like, this cryptocurrency is going to 100x tomorrow, is going to get clicked over the best feature of this project that will make it valuable in 5 years. Like the one is more exciting than the other one. And just be cognizant of like the cognitive bias that comes with that when you want to click that video that confirms that you're going to be rich tomorrow, right? It's like and it's something everybody struggles with, including me. And I know these rules. So just be mindful of that.
Great advice there. I absolutely agree with all of that. And so what is next for Hashoshi? Like, do you ever see this becoming your full-time gig? Do you have any like special plans for the future, or, you'll just keep creating the videos that you're creating, which are already really great?
Thanks. Yeah. I don't know exactly what the future holds longer term. Right now, totally happy to do this in spare time, and it's a lot of fun. Really thankful for everyone who watches my stuff. Generally, it still blows my mind all the time. But for me, one thing I do know is that I've got a couple of new like running predictable like same day every week type of segments coming out. So stay tuned for those. One of them has already been like kind of announced subtly for people who watch my channel. There's going to be like my 404 logic not found segment, which is kind of like debunking or like kind of taking down sort of weird, illogical, like goofy stuff that happens in the tech world or in the crypto world. So that's coming, but another cool series that's coming soon that I've been working on for a while. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. And then we end every episode of the podcast with a segment called Explain Your Tweet. So we've got to do that with you. I'm just going to pull out one tweet in the interest of time.
Cool.
But this one is from June 30th, 2021.
Cool.
You tweeted, I took a 2-month road trip around the USA, camping and couch surfing after college. I saw 38 states and met people all over. That changed my life. You don't realize how different the world is from where you grow up until you see it. Everyone should do this. Eye-opening. I feel like you've got a lot of great stories here. I just wanted to hear more about it.
Yeah, this was something I did after school and like after kind of right before I started like really working. I've always kind of worked and like done stuff. Like I was a cook for a long time and I was doing like, website design and development before that. But like before I really started like settling down and working, I took this road trip with a couple of friends around the US. And I just being able to go from state to state and realizing like even in the US, not even traveling abroad, which I've also done. And that's, if people are lucky enough to be able to do that, that's also life-changing. But even inside of the US specifically, every state is like its own country. The culture is different. People speak differently. The socioeconomics are very different. And like, it's one of those things where if you've lived in one place and you haven't moved around a lot, you don't realize how different everything is in different places that are even really close to you, within 200 miles of you. And that to me was really eye-opening. But the other thing too is a lot of people that grow up now are very like tied to technology and very tied to like habit, and like they do the same thing every day. And doing that trip is kind of like, it proved to me that you can live on no money, basically. Like you can literally have very little have very little resources, and you can still eat really well and like survive, like live for a couple months on like barely any money, which was huge. And then the other thing too is that being close to nature and like living in nature, minus some of the things that make it uncomfortable, like one of the most, your mind just feels better. At least for me, you just feel better there because you don't feel like there's just stuff weighing down on you, because you feel very open and free. So that's a huge thing. Like if you have the chance, if you live in the US or if you're from another country, just come to the US. Don't go to cities, go to national parks and camp. Or if you're not into camping, rent a car and camp in the back of the car with like air conditioning, whatever you got to do. But it's like, if I could recommend one thing to everyone in terms of travel, like the extravagant trips like abroad are cool, but national parks, wherever you are game changing.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Before, I feel like one of the silver linings that's come out of COVID for me, at least, is it's forced me to be more of a road tripper instead of a hop on the plane and go somewhere far away kind of person.
Totally.
But got to like see so many new states in the last year since, haven't really been able to fly. And for instance, we just drove through Colorado and Utah, and I was like posting videos and photos from Utah, and people were like, what? Like Utah has mountains? Utah has like... Yeah, like people have no idea like what they've even got in their own home country, myself included. So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, driving, you have all the freedom in the world. Like you can be like, hey, this looks cool. I'm going to stop here and we're going to stay here for 2 days. Like that stuff is just really fun, I think, personally.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Well, thank you so much, Hashoshi, for joining me here. I feel like I have to like re-listen to this episode that I was already part of so I can take notes about how you explain all of these concepts so well to newbies, because that's something that I definitely struggle with. Before you go, remind people again, how they can find you, whether it's on YouTube or Twitter or wherever you have a presence online, how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure. I would say the most active place for me, generally speaking, would be obviously YouTube, where I post videos every week. You can find me on there by just searching Hashoshi, Hashoshi. And then on Twitter, I'm also very active, and I try and answer every question I get. Obviously, sometimes I get busy and I can't, but I am at Hashoshi4, the number 4. And so make sure, there are a lot of scammers out there, like pretending to be me with like weird, like little permutations of my name, where it's like they remove an H or they add an underscore at the end. I'm not going to reach out to you and like sell you mining equipment. So that isn't me, but you'll know at Hashoshi4 is the only place. And I think Twitter and YouTube are the best place to reach me.
Perfect. We'll include that in the show notes as well so people can click through easily. Thanks again, Hashoshi, so much for being here. Can't wait for people to see the other content that we're going to create and release this month as well. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and we will be back again soon with another episode of the Unstoppable Podcast.
Great. Thank you.